Hey everyone, it's Matt, and we got a really cool edition of Tether Talks today with Cleo Stiller, who's the author of Modern Manhood. Cleo is someone I've wanted to have on for a really, really long time, and I think you're going to get a tremendous amount out of this conversation. So, Cleo Stiller is an Emmy Award and Peabody winning journalist. She's the author of Modern Manhood, which is a deep dive into modern masculinity in the era of the Me Too movement. I'm so excited to have her on. We've had a couple conversations with her, and ever since we heard about her book, we've been wanting to get her on an IGTV Live with us. So today is the day for that. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I'm personally very, very excited. So she's joining us now, and she's going to send that request, and we're going to jump on. So this is going to be fun. Hello.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. By the way, I was just introing you, and I was just saying this is a conversation that I've been like dying to have with you for the longest time. Like ever since we heard about your book, we were like, we got to get her on to do an IGTV Live. So I'm super pumped, and hopefully I'm gonna transfer some of that good, positive, high-minded energy to you as well.
Good. We need it this week.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know.
I know.
It's been a challenging week for the United. I mean, I'm Canadian, but it seems like we kind of watch and just sort of shake our heads sometimes and wonder what's kind of going on. And how's this week been for you? What's it been bringing up?
Well, I am a journalist by trade. And so this is one of the first times, like a national crisis like this has happened that I haven't been working full time in a newsroom. And so I've just been watching from the sidelines in shock, and doing my best on Twitter, and just to call reliable sourcing. I mean, I saw one of the first videos of the storming of the Capitol came from a reporter at the Blaze, and I thought, okay, I'm going to need confirmation of this. He said thousands were storming. I couldn't find confirmation of thousands. And then once it started getting picked up by all the outlets, I just thought, I had thought maybe it was a hoax. And so to see, this is wild. It's really wild. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our politics aren't nearly as interesting as your politics. And so we kind of just, watch from afar with like mouths, agape, and we're just like, what is going on? So yeah, my heart goes out to everyone in the U.S. It's a challenging time, especially during this transition period. And we're just kind of wishing for all the best. And, it's sad that people were killed and injured, and it's an overwhelming story.
Yeah, very overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe an opportunity to heal and learn and come together. So hopeful for that.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. Healing, learning, coming together. We've started doing this little thing on the beginning of our Instagram Live. So if you're open to it, what I'd love to be able to do is just like quickly take a few deep breaths. And what we've started doing is checking in with how we are feeling right now coming into the IGTV Live. So if you're down to do it, I'm just going to close my eyes and take a few deep breaths, and then we'll come back. So we'll just take 3 deep breaths. And so I'll lead this off. We're going to check in with one word about how we're feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically. So I'll start just to quickly model it. So mentally, I'm feeling clear. Emotionally, I'm feeling tense. And physically, I'm feeling worn down. So I'm checking in with that, and that's what I'm coming to this conversation with today.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I love this. Um, Mentally, I'm bubbling.
Mm.
Uh, Emotionally, a little tired.
Hmm.
And physically, I'm settled. Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome again.
Thank
For anyone that's joining now or watching this, at a future date, we're here with Cleo Stiller, who's the author of Modern Manhood. She is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist. This is going to be a really, really interesting conversation, and I kind of wanted to start this with you, just by like getting what was your inspiration for writing this book? What sparked you to want to have this conversation and to dedicate your time to bringing this conversation into the fore, because it is such, like, in the wake of Me Too, and I think we're still seeing reverberations, and even what's going on politically in the U.S. right now is very much an echo, and I think a response in many ways to that conversation. So what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the first question I always get asked, or an iteration of that is, why is a woman writing a book called Modern Manhood? And the reason is that when I was hosting a show for Univision for many years about health and relationships, and when Me Too first happened, as you know, it hit the mainstream because of the Harvey Weinstein and the Bill Cosby scandals. But the impact had a severe trickle down effect. And so I had men writing into me who watched my show saying, "Are you going to do a season on this? Because I have so much to say about what's happening right now. And I'm kind of afraid to say anything. I don't want to get in trouble." But
Mm-hmm.
and then they would have a question about how everything that's been going on was impacting their lives personally. And this would range from single guys being like, I am terrified to approach women. I feel like everything I was taught to do is now considered creepy or worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had new dads writing in being like, I just found out I'm expecting my first kid and it's going to be a boy, and frankly I'm terrified. I don't even know what it means to raise a good man anymore. And then I had bosses. So prior to Univision, I worked at Bloomberg, covered financial news for them, so I had like a lot of Wall Street connections, and I had VPs on Wall Street being like, listen, I'm not going to cop to this on the record, but I've got a lot of hiring power, and I'm not going to hire any new female staff, and I sure as hell I'm not going to mentor my current female employees. It's just not worth the risk. And so these are all rolling in, right? And I am just thinking, oh shit, if I'm hearing this is people being really honest. And men were saying, I'm talking about this on my group text with my buddies. Like, we're all discussing it, but it's kind of preaching to the choir. And I knew on the other side of the aisle, women were having and survivors were having conversations about this. And they were saying, men don't care. Like, I haven't heard from any men. Men don't care. And I knew they did. So Modern Manhood is the amalgamation of reporting this out. Basically, like, okay, what are we going to do about this? What are men saying privately?
Mm-hmm.
And let's come together and just like air it all out, because I don't know about you, but I don't really want to be having the same conversation in a decade, So this book is really, it's the thoughts, feelings, confessions, concerns of men all over the country when it comes to really intimate aspects of our lives. And then, of course, infused with research from historians, anthropologists, neurologists, scientists of all different departments, to see like how we as a society can come together and be better.
I love the entire premise of the book, because and I love that you were able to sort of jump in the middle of the conversation and sort of mediate between these two sides. And I think, like, naturally, that's a journalistic instinct, right? It's taking yourself out of that, like, personally, and what you may be sort of feeling about the conversation, and saying, okay, objectively, what are both sides saying right now, and how can I jump in the middle of this and mediate this conversation? And I think it's so important that you specifically wrote this book, because, you know, I think for a lot of men, and you kind of mentioned, is we don't know where to begin this conversation with people, and especially men who want to be seen as good men, and have all of that. And I think, like, if you look at your book, on someone asked, where can you find the book? You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Cleo's website, and
Yeah.
I'll let you do all of your plugging a little bit later on. But on your Amazon, on the link in Amazon, it says, like, if you don't believe in women's equality and all of these other things, this is not the book for you.
Right.
And I know so many people in my circle, right, who, you know, cherish the women in their lives, believe in equality for women, believe in equal rights, want to be part of the solution for this, and they have no idea how to have this conversation or where to start. And so having you speak so openly and so, like, forthrightly about this is really such an important gateway. So for the men, let's start here. For the men that actually want to begin this conversation and want to understand what, and this was actually going to be a question that I asked to you a little bit later on, and I want to come at it from two angles. The first angle is, you know, from your speaking to women, what do women right now need from the men in their lives, the men that they interact with, in order to feel safe, and in order to feel heard in this conversation? And I would also love for you to, even if you want to bring in personally any anecdotes that you have, and speak to what have you needed through this process, because being a journalist and being a female journalist, I'm sure you've bumped up against challenges, you know, blockades, things like that in your career in getting to where you are.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to say, someone did ask us, is this book specifically for men in the US, or does it apply around the world? And I just want to share that I interviewed men exclusively in the US, but part of that men interviewing immigrants. And so we have perspectives from Guatemalan Americans, Indian Americans, British Americans, so Chinese American. You know, that's so critical to understanding modern manhood in the United States, is of course acknowledging that so many of us have other cultural influences. And so, just FYI, very diverse perspective, men interviewed from the ages of 18 to 62 all over the country. So yeah. Okay, so what do women need to feel safe in this conversation? It's very hard to give maximalist advice to a question like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there's so much nuance with everything, right? Because what my experience is as a woman is very different from another woman's. And so we all need very different things. And part of that is understanding. That's why this is so hard, and it's also why this is so important, right? You kind of have to strap in if you're a guy and you're wanting to participate in this conversation. You're gonna fuck up, okay? So strap in. It's gonna be uncomfortable. That's okay. That is okay, and it's unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
But what many women need that they feel like they're not getting is this feeling that at first, when Me Too started and people were sharing stories, there was this kind of shock that, oh shit, is it really that bad? I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. And then, oh good, I'm glad you're sharing your story. And then that quickly became, okay, enough. We've heard enough about it. Like, what are we going to do about it? Because I don't want to hear any more shit, right? It's too troubling, and we've heard enough, and now we need to move on. And I think a little bit more of an understanding that these stories have been kept so tightly by survivors and women for so long that many feel that they've only been given like a glimmer of an opportunity to express their experiences. And so there's some frustration around feeling like, okay, now hurry on and let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
So like allowing a little bit more space would be lovely. And then also
Mm-hmm.
this idea that, I mean, this is so parallel to anyone that's participating in BLM conversations this year. That we're,
I was gonna say. I mean,
right?
it's like it's repeating itself right now. Anyway,
It's
please
it's
go.
in
Yeah.
many ways very similar, where if you're a guy and you're interacting with a woman in a conversation about this, to remember that she's probably not talking about you specifically. So, you know, I'll give a personal example. When I was discussing this with my partner at the time, something that had happened to me, I mean, I talk about it in the book. So, you know, I worked at Univision. Prior to that, I worked at Bloomberg. Prior to that, I worked at an investment firm. And those have been my 3 jobs since undergrad. And at each one, I list a story that is sort of like, so at the investment firm I worked at, it was a biotech firm. And we did med tech devices as well. It was a very small boutique firm. That means like not many employees, but is the largest healthcare focused firm in the world. The amount of investment, you know, that our company held was astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
So small company, lots of power, always rife for some trouble. Our CEO, the hijinks at this company were out of control. But an example is that the CEO kept breast implants on his desk. We were early investors in these breast implants. So it was somewhat, you could say like, oh, well, we invest in this product. But it was just very clear. He had them on his desk so that he could talk about breasts whenever he wanted to. And when I interviewed for the job there, I did 4 rounds. My last round was with him, and I interviewed with him in his office, and he pointed to, there were 2. He was like, do you know the difference between these? And I was like, the breast implants? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, one's saline. And he was like, do you have a personal preference? So anyway, so within the first interview round, right, we're talking about breast implants. And this is just how my job started. And you could say, well, why would you take that job? It was an incredible opportunity. So, and this happens all the time, right? At Univision, or I'm sorry, at Bloomberg, I shot stories in a camera that was on a very secluded wing in the office right after Charlie Rose. And everyone told me, you really need to try and get that shift moved because Charlie. So everyone knew about Charlie, and I couldn't get that shift moved. And I also, you know, thought like, I think it's a really great opportunity that I could get to talk to Charlie Rose once a week. I'm not going to do that. And again, this is just like, there was a whisper network, right? Okay. And then my final role at Univision, there was one of the highest ranking EPs at our company, messaged me one night and was like, hey, I'm flying into New York. Do you want to discuss this story? Meet me at my hotel bar. And in journalism, like so many industries, most of the business doesn't happen at the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Happens at coffee dates, happens at drinks. Like if you can get a source, take them out for dinner, get great stories. This is how business is conducted. And so I met the EP at the hotel bar, and we discussed my first international assignment, and it was going to be featured on a show for one of like the #1 Latino anchors in the country. And the opportunity was just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very excited. Then he kissed me and invited me up to his room at the hotel, and I was shocked. I left immediately and said no. And I waited a couple days for things to cool down, and then I emailed him as if nothing had happened, and I never heard back from him. And I sent a couple follow-up emails like, hey, not sure you got my message, still want to do this story. Never got that assignment, never got that opportunity. So these are just really minor stories, like, but when I had told my partner about them, he poked holes in all of them. Like, why would I go to the hotel? Why would I take a job where there was the CEO was talking about breast implants. And it made it really clear to me that he didn't want my story to be okay. He didn't want it to have happened, but he wanted to explain why it happened because of my behavior, rather than just saying that's not right. And the only reason I can think of that is because there's part of him that felt personally responsible for it, even though it obviously had nothing to do with him. And so I think, like, I'm curious when I say this to you, do you, well, we're not, you know, I mean, like, we're not dating, but
Yes.
does any of it make you uncomfortable? Like, do you want to excuse the behavior?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, no. I mean, for me, no. I mean, this is like, it's the equivalent of saying, well, you shouldn't have been wearing that dress with like that was so low cut, right?
Right.
Or like you dressed and it invited this, and it's like, for me, that's, you know, it's not a reason. None of these are reasons. And actually, as you were speaking, and you brought up the BLM thing, right? Because what I think is so important in this conversation, right? And you mentioned this, and it's like, you know, strap in, this is going to be uncomfortable, right? It's not our job to prescribe, to justify, to what it is simply our job to listen.
Yeah.
And to take in and to ask, how did that make you feel, to understand, right? It's not our job to, and I think this is something that men do a lot, is we want to fix the thing, right?
Exactly.
We want to fix it. We want to be like, oh no, that's not that big of a problem. Oh, you know, all of these different pieces. And it's like, it's completely missing the point. And this goes to a much larger conversation about how men and women can hold space for each other within the context of this conversation. Because, you know, I personally believe that it's, you know, it's our job to listen, to absorb, to ask questions, to seek to understand as opposed to be understood. And I think that's where a lot of men have missed the boat in this conversation. Personally, is that they're seeking to be understood. They're seeking to justify. They're seeking to excuse behavior. And that's not the point of it. And I also believe that women have a role in this conversation too. And that's why, like, I was personally so excited to have this conversation with you, because I think I want to ask that, but it's something that I want to get to like a little bit later. And I have so many questions. We could do this for hours, to be honest. But no, to answer your question, it does not make me uncomfortable in any way. And this was something that I also sought to do as a white male of privilege during everything that was going on with BLM, is that I wanted to have these conversations. I wanted to understand. I knew that, like, listen, it's like, if I'm not guilty. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not on trial here. What I'm here to do is to educate myself, to understand, to become more aware of this conversation, because I think it's so important that this is something that actually brings us together, right? And this is something that actually heals these wounds as opposed to creates division. And when men seek to be understood in this conversation, it isn't healing the wounds that have been going on for generations and generations and millennia, right? So I think it's important from my perspective, it's that, you know, and this is something that, like, you know, I just practice with my own personal emotions around everything in my life. And I think men, and this is where, you know, what Tethr is really trying to do, is trying to get men more comfortable with actually feeling what is going on inside of them. And that discomfort that you're describing, that your ex-partner was, or maybe current partner was trying to you know, push away, was, I am so uncomfortable with what I am feeling right now. I am going to justify, rationalize, and speak this away, because I can't hold this within myself. And so I think it's really important that men are also starting to learn how to sit and hold these feelings, these emotions, because it's going to allow us to actually have these conversations and mend the fences, so to speak. And you know, I mean, I have stories from women in my life, you know, that you know, I'm not going to go into, because it's, you know, it's not my place to speak of it. But you know, I know women in my life that have had similar experiences, the exact same experiences, worse experiences, slightly smaller experiences, like those little subtle, you know, things that you know, you just kind of like cringe a little bit at it, like very much like, you know, I mean, it's not subtle having breast implants on your desk,
Right.
like this guy had it at his job, but it's like, you know, it's all of those little micro things that collectively make, you know, women feel unsafe in these conversations, unsafe in the workplace, unsafe generally, you know, just living their lives. And I also think it's, you know, it's a really great parallel that you made to BLM specifically, because we're now, as both men and women, of non-people of color, not Black people, not people who are BIPOC, you know, we have to now sit into that conversation as well and do the same thing. So I want to get us back on track, but I appreciate you asking me that question. I kind of went on a little bit about that.
No, it's good though. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's great. I like this being like, so if you ever want to then, because I know it's like you can't resist the hat of like, you know, turning it around back on me and making this, I know you're well trained in that sense. So, you know, and this is really interesting. So I think we know the collective impact that Me Too has had, or maybe, you know, people don't understand the collective impact that it's had. But I'm really interested to hear from you what the impact you believe is of the Me Too movement on the collective male psyche, and then like how can we sort of begin unraveling this, and then I'm trying to stop myself from asking multiple questions in a row because it's a bad habit that I have. So what is the impact that Me Too has had on the collective male psyche, and how can we start to begin unraveling this and actually start to mend fences?
So I think overall, I would say that there's a real silver lining to the impact, which is that people, men who were previously oblivious or didn't care, now really their eyes are much more open, and they want to get at the table. And you know, for better or for worse, they didn't realize that this was going on, and they're appalled and want to help and make it better so that this doesn't happen. And again, a huge parallel to BLM, right? So I think it's largely positive. Of course, there's been some backlash. But to harken back to our previous question, I think the other thing is it's not just one conversation, right? Like you might spend the first conversation hearing a lot of stories, and then your second conversation might be thinking more about how you were implicated in something in the past and you didn't know about. What could you have done better? What can you do better going forward? And then also, then maybe the third conversation is how you haven't felt seen or heard. I think the real thing is, this becomes very apparent in the research in the book. When I started interviewing men, having primarily done women's health for most of my career, I can say that the one thing that surprised me more than anything else that I reported in the book was how collectively men felt unheard, unappreciated. They felt like the world, the weight of the world is on their shoulders, and they can't talk about it. It's stifling. And I didn't know that. And I don't think a lot of women know that. And I also don't think men know that other men feel that too. And so I think collectively understanding that we're all suffering a silent battle is very, you know, it's of course disheartening, but there's huge opportunity there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this idea of like the weight of the world being on the shoulders, and I think the stiflingness, and I talk about this a lot too, is this very outdated notion of what it means to be a man, where you have to be the sole provider, you have to be resilient. I mean, we get it in movies all the time, right? Where it's like, the protagonist has a problem or a thing that needs to be overcome, but he doesn't overcome it with help from other people or by talking about it or by getting emotional support for it. He just figures out a way to like muscle through and kind of get it done. And so we've had this modeled and signaled to us, for generations and generations and generations. And again, you mentioned this, I think very poignantly, is that we don't feel like we have permission to talk about it with women, or more importantly, I think, amongst ourselves. Yep. Right? And I think so much of the diffusing of this situation actually begins from actually discussing it amongst ourselves, because there is this inherent fear, there is this inherent feeling of inadequacy. And I think a lot of what we see, in terms of the negative behaviors that we associate with the Me Too movement, right? So much of that is actually coming from a place of inadequacy and actually an anger and a fear and a not knowing what to do. And so because there's this feeling that I can't talk about any of these things, it builds up this toxicity within the person. It creates this pain within them. And because there is no way in their minds, or there is no outlet that is acceptable for them to have that conversation, it comes out as aggression and anger, which are character traits that we actually associate with men that are okay. Like, it's not okay for a guy to cry, but sure as hell is okay for them to get angry. I mean, society doesn't reward anger but it's like, it is manly in some ways.
Totally. And so actually, the chapter that ended up being the most interesting to me to report, which was so crazy. So the chapters are dedicated to a different area of your personal life. So there's dating, sex, work, money, parenting, friendship, mental health. Male friendship was like not a topic that I thought I would find all that interesting, but it ended up being the most interesting chapter, because the questions that I was hearing from men over and over again, I would not have written this if men didn't ask me this question of like, they were basically like, okay, I've got a friend, we've all got this friend, says some racist, sexist stuff. We used to kind of laugh it off and just kind of ignore him. But now with everything going on, it doesn't feel like that's okay anymore. Mm-hmm. How do I call out my friend without losing him, or having him turn it around on me and be like, what, are you perfect? Because obviously no one is.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm seeing you shake your head, so I know you can kind of, you vibe with this, and this came in from plenty of guys, so it's out there. So the real question is like, all right, well, why do guys talk like that, right? Quote unquote locker room talk, like why do guys do locker room talk? And when I interviewed men, they were like, listen, I'm not proud of locker room talk, but like, don't take it from me, because that's what I've got. Like, I can't just roll into a conversation with a guy, even if he's my best friend, and be like, I'm really feeling down and it's been a long time. And, all of these emotional reflections that women do quite easily, mm-hmm. Guys can't do that. And so the question really is, why? Like, are men not wired to talk about their emotions? Like, what's that about? Mm-hmm. And I talked to a researcher named Niobe Way, who's been researching male adolescents for 30 years. And she told me about this social experiment she runs where, so first of all, background information. When girls and boys are young, like playground age, they actually form friendships the same exact way. They're hugging their friends, they're kissing their friends, they're whispering in their friend's ear, telling them everything, all their secrets. And then at that age, at playground age, young boys start becoming policed by their teachers, their siblings, their parents. No. Don't talk to your friend like that. That's a girl thing. Don't hug your friend like that. That's what girls do. Don't whisper to your friend. Girls do that. Boys, get on the field, play this game.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with sports, but you need both, right? Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is that girls from an early age are actually encouraged to talk about their feelings, to share their feelings, to know what they're feeling, to have the full spectrum of emotion, except for anger, because that's a man thing. And boys don't get to do that. And what we know is that verbalization is such an important process in human cognition. So if you don't talk about your feelings for a week, fine. For 20 years, you forget you have those feelings. And so for any women watching, this will sound familiar. Have you ever been in a fight with your male partner and you look at him and you're just like, just tell me what you're feeling? Dudes, if you're watching this, you're like, oh my God, I've totally been there. You're like a deer caught in headlights, like back off. Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm feeling, back off. The woman in that situation is thinking like, we have no connection here. He can't even tell me how he feels. And men are not thinking that at all. They're thinking,
what the fuck am I feeling?
What the fuck? When the fuck was the last time anyone asked me how I was feeling? Oh, I was 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is so, like, it's so fundamental to how, and again, I don't do kind of like gender maximalist or like essentialism. Like, I don't really believe in that. But in that kind of socialized way, for women and men to not know that they are so socialized so fundamentally differently, and then we get to the same age group and you're in a relationship with someone or your boss or something, and you do not understand how they're communicating, we need this critical information, because I think it just makes, you know, for me at least, when I learned this, I was like, oh, you know, just like all these times in my mind.
And I'm going to jump onto that a little bit too, because there's actually research that suggests that the modality of therapy in and of itself doesn't really work for men. And if we look at it, men underutilize mental health and well-being services by about 50%. If you look at digital therapy apps, you know, up to 70% of the usership is actually female. Right? And people are like, well, why aren't men using therapy or going to therapy or doing digital therapy or, you know, all of these kinds of questions. And I was like, therapy is premised on the idea that you are talking about how you are feeling. If you have never been trained to actually talk about your feeling, why would a modality that is entirely, you know, made up of talking about your feeling actually work for you? You haven't even been trained to do that.
Totally.
Right? And it's so clear to me, right? It's like part of this is also that we need to train men how to emote and how to be like, and how to know the difference, because like, you know, there's the old joke that there's only 3 emotions that men have, right? And I don't need to repeat that. Everyone kind of knows that joke, right?
No, I don't know the joke.
Oh, it's happy, angry, horny. They're the 3 emotions that men have, right? That is our emotional spectrum. Right. Yeah. And it's because you're right. We haven't developed any of that nuance. Right. Yeah. There's no nuance. Right. And it's literally been beaten out of us from a very young age. And the problem is that we don't have anybody to model this for us, because our fathers had it beaten out of them and their fathers had it beaten out of them. And I mean, not to bring this back to tether, but I think that's why, you know, what we've built can be so powerful, is because we do actually provide a space where that behavior can be modeled, and we're starting to see this come up. And I know you dug into like men's groups specifically in the impact that they're having. So, you know, I see that segment and men's groups and guys getting together, and there's this whole, you know, there's this saying that men heal shoulder to shoulder, and like we like the team environment because, again, we were told to get out on the field and hustle and all of that kind of stuff from a very, very young age. So, you know, we try and include this and incorporate this into what we do, which is peer programming, because it's like everyone wants to be a part of the team. But when you went into that whole men's group world and that whole men's circle world, what did you find out, and what did you find that men were getting from that maybe they weren't getting from other places?
Well, so I love this. You have the Triple H joke, which actually I'd never heard. I have a joke in my family that is, dad has no friends, mom has tons of friends, and dad has the dog.
Yes.
And right. And so
Yeah.
as I started recording this book, I found out, oh, that's like not my family. That's almost every family.
Yeah. And that's also why, sorry to cut you off, that's why so many men actually are worse off after
Yeah,
divorces, because they take on the friends of the woman. They lose all of their
it
connections
was
and they're
all there.
left completely alone. But anyway, sorry, go on.
So, but exactly. So that's, women don't realize this, or they do a little bit, right? But like the impact of that then for any women watching is like, if you've ever felt like your male partner's partner, lover, mother, priest, shrink, nanny, all of that, it because in some ways you do end up wearing all of these hats, whereas women are socialized to have, you go to your therapist for your therapy, you go to your girlfriends for that, you call your mom for that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, again, not every woman, some women.
Yes.
But so the beauty of men's groups is that you get in a situation that women completely take for granted. And seeing men come together, like I think of it kind of like a caucus, to be honest, of, again, men is just such a broad experience. There's no single male experience, but coming together with people you consider peers, and being able to share vulnerably what you're going through. And usually these groups are structured in a way that appeals to men, you know, sort of like sets up like accountability. I did learn, there were some things I learned, right? Like I learned that if I say the word self-care, men just completely glaze over.
Mm-hmm.
So now I use the word life hack.
Yes, yeah. There's a whole vocabulary to this.
Yeah, it's the language. It's the language. And so I feel like in men's groups, there's like a lot of talk about like performance support, like teamwork. Like you said, everyone wants to be part of the team. So, and I have told, okay, so women, single women will ask me, what do I need to know from your book? And I tell them, find a men's group in your community and just post up right outside of that group, because you only want to date men that are going to a men's group, basically. Like that is the surest bet for getting like a good, healthy dude.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
You want to know, the first thing you want to know is how long have they been going to
How long have
group?
you been to the
That's the first screening question, and then if it's anything over a year, then you can feel good to go.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting. So it's I want to kind of circle back to the concept of being a man in the modern world. And I think for a lot of guys, this is the first time that they're ever going into this. This is the first time that they're even awakening. And I think the last few years have been such a collective societal awakening to different values, to reconsidering. I think COVID has had a tremendous impact, and it's like pushing people through the eye of the needle. And we are having more of this kind of collective awakening. George Floyd is doing that on the issues of race. Me Too did that on the issues of gender disparity, and and what men do to push women down, and what's acceptable and not acceptable. But what's so interesting to me, and you mentioned this briefly at the beginning, is how dating is changing, right, for a lot of men, and we get this all the time. It is we see men that are coming onto this platform, and they have no idea how to date anymore. They have no idea what to say. Everything feels like it could be taken, and nobody wants to be quote unquote me too'd in their dating life, right? And so I often, like, guys have talked to me about this, and like I have a lot of these conversations, which I'm very fortunate and grateful to be able to have. So I feel like I have a good understanding. And I often say, it's like, if you had a female sibling, would you say that to your female sibling, or would you want to hear a guy say that? If what you're saying, if that was said to a female sibling of yours and it would make you want to punch the guy in the face, don't say it, or don't do it, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the barometer that I give other guys, because it's a lot of guys, a lot of us have sisters, but like, how has that dating world changed? And from a female perspective, because like, I know that women still want to be flirted with, women still want to be made to feel like women, but the ground rules are shifting and changing. So would you like to chat a little bit about how the ground rules have kind of shifted, and then even from what you've understand collectively, and then also even for you, if you're comfortable sharing, it's like, how is dating different now, and how can men show up in a way that makes, again, women feel safe, and that also makes the process fun? Because that's ultimately what this is supposed to be. Dating is supposed to be a fun thing, and we should enjoy it. So how can we enjoy it collectively?
Yeah, so this one is complicated. It's complicated in the way they're all complicated, but
Yes.
So basically, like, one question that came up, so the overall feeling about dating was like, I feel like everything I was taught to do is now considered creepy or worse. And within that, the question of, am I supposed to pay or not pay, came up almost immediately, which is shocking to me in 2021 that we are still having this question. And the answer to that question is actually extrapolates the whole point of the book. So happy to talk about it. So the question of whether or not you should pay for a first date, what I heard from guys is like, they're like, this is so confusing, because half the guys would say this: I'll go on one date with one woman and offer to pay because that's how I was raised. And she'll be like, fuck off, I can pay for myself, and be totally offended that I have offered to pay. So then I go on a date with the next woman and I don't offer to pay because I'm not an idiot and I learned from the first one. And then she's offended. She thinks I'm a cheapskate or like not a good guy. I didn't pay. And like, what the fuck?
I swear, I can't stop. It's hysterical. It's comical.
Right? Okay. And then also there were some portion of guys who just were like, I just think it's bullshit that I would pay because I do believe in women's equality and I believe in it across the board. So if we're doing this equality thing, how come I'm still paying for dates? They were kind of pissed about it. Okay, great. So then I start talking to the women. All right, do you like a guy to pay for a date? Half the women said yes. And I'd be like, okay, why? And they were like, I don't really know. And I'm like, and it's interesting because your other views about gender norms are very progressive, and this one's very traditional. They're like, you're right. I don't know. That's kind of weird. It's confusing. I'm like, oh, okay. So you're confused. Do you ever say to the guy you're on a date with, like, I love to be treated? And they're like, no, why would I say that? I'm like, well, how is he supposed to know? So, okay, everyone's confused. No one's talking about it. It's a complete mess. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. It is very confusing for men. You are not wrong. Like, you're right. You're going to get it coming and going. And that's because women are completely inconsistent, also don't know what they want. And when they do know what they want, they're not going to tell you. So it's wild. So here's the advice.
This sounds like a train wreck about to happen.
Like, it's a complete disaster. And that's why we have horrible hookups and terrible sex, because this is exactly what happens. But anyway, so the first question is, do you want to pay for the date? Do you want to pay for the date? And listen, this whole Me Too movement, I know, has left men feeling really disempowered. Like, they don't know what to do, what's the right thing to do. A great place to start is, what do you want to do? Okay? So a lot of men, if you ask them that, will be like, oh, I want to pay for the date because that's how I was raised. Like, that feels right. And I actually think that that's a really lovely impulse, right? So what I recommend is, like, once you get clear on whether you want to pay for the date or not, own that. And the lesson here is that there's so many behaviors we have as men and women that we were taught to do, but we never thought about why or if we even wanted to do it. And so when it gets called into question, it feels really confusing because we've never taken that moment to be like, oh, wait, why do I do this? Oh, yeah. Okay. So, all right, this is a great example. Now you've decided you want to pay for the date because that's how you were raised and it feels good. So then you go on the date and you tell the woman, listen, I would love to treat you tonight because that's how I was raised and it feels really good for me to treat the partners I'm with. How does that sound?
Mm-hmm.
I think you are really hard pressed to find a woman who's not going to love that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do go on a date with a woman who's like, you're a caveman, like, no way. Newsflash, you are not going to be a good fit with that woman.
Yes.
And I had other dudes, just so you know, if you don't like if you think about like, do I want to pay for the date? And you're like, not really. You don't have to.
Yeah.
I talked to plenty of dudes who were like, you know what? No. And I talked to one dude who was really interesting. He was like, I know there's a pay wage gap. So I feel like I want to pay for like the first 3 dates, but then not after that because I want to kind of compensate for that inequality I know exists. And I was like, dude, I love this. It's a nuanced theory. So I recommend.
It's a lot of overthinking.
Yeah, I'm like, I recommend you say it because not every woman is going to be down for that, but you are totally going to find some women who hear you say that and they're like, I dig you. Like, I am about that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's actually like, once you get clear on what you want to do, then say what you're doing. You are going to connect with people like so much quicker and it starts helping you in general. Mm-hmm. Verbalize your feelings. There's that verbalization.
There you go.
And then if you're beating out people, you're not going to be a good match.
And it's interesting because like I'll say like my personal feelings on this is that I like to do that because I like to do something. To me it feels like I'm doing something nice for them, right? Yeah. And it's like for me it's like it's an act of, and like you know it's a love language thing. It's all of those things. It's like it's an act of service. Not really an act of service. It's like it's a gift. It's like it's a couple things that like you like because it's like you want to make them feel special. However, the caveat to that being is that it's not expected, right? Yeah. It's like it's appreciated but not expected. If it's expected, rips all the fucking joy out of it for me. Right?
Yeah. Oh my God, I totally get that. Yes.
That to me is the nuance for me. It's like if it's appreciated and like it's like yeah, no that like and it's like we're both having a good time and that's part of it, then I'm like, yes, I want to do this because it's fun for me to be able to do that. If it's like, if I can tell that it's kind of expected that I pay for it, that's when I start to, and it's not that there's like any resentment. It's just like, it takes a little bit of the fun away of it from me because I think this is such a key thing on both sides is this idea of appreciation, right? And I think that's the key to it is like, there's things that women do for men that are unappreciated and there's things that men do for women that are unappreciated. And again, it's because like you said, we're not having this conversation. We're not saying I do this because blank, because it makes me feel good, because I like doing it, whatever that is. And that can be at any stage in a relationship. We don't talk about the fact that it's like I'm actually doing this because I care about you, right? Yeah. And it took me such a long time to understand that the way that certain people were going to treat me or what have you, it's like, no, but like, I need this from you. And it's like, that ain't how it works, right? It's like, they're doing that for you because at some point they learned, or, because of something inside of them, that's how they show love. That's how they show appreciation. So I think that there's like an appreciation gap that's existing in all of this. And as you so rightly said, verbalizing the reasons why we do certain things.
And this is something that is beyond gender. A lot of it is beyond gender. Mm. And why communicating, it sounds so basic, but when you apply it to like these micro situations, it makes such a difference. Communicating is so critical because there are so many assumptions we're all making. And then by not communicating it, newsflash, we're disconnected and isolated and in our own worlds. And yeah, that leads to frustration, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not feeling appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really I couldn't have I couldn't have planned the way that this conversation snaked and maneuvered, but I really enjoyed this. I want to be respectful of your time. We've got about 5 minutes left. Is there something that you want to highlight from, you know, Modern Manhood, from your book, that you've learned that like you really want to like let men know this, like this is super important. This is something that I really want you to internalize, so that we can, because I think the purpose of this conversation for me is to really start to have both sides understanding, so that we can have these conversations, which are going to be uncomfortable and which we're not going to always enjoy. But is there something that you really want men to be taking away from your book and your writing that you think is critical to this dialogue?
Yeah, and to bring in BLM again, I mean, I've had to think a lot about, as a white person, why I participate in the work that I do for social justice. And it's because I don't want to have this conversation in a decade.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do not want my friends of color to be afraid to run in their neighborhoods. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No more. So I think for men, you know, good men don't want to see women suffer, right? And so anytime, and it's just so important to get clear on why you're doing it, because this will happen. You'll screw up and someone is going to call you out, and then your initial instinct is probably going to be self-protective. So you're going to be like, fuck this shit. This is why I shouldn't have gotten involved. I'm not saying fuck all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that. Don't do that, because you are going to mess up. We are all going to mess up. But movement on this front is so important. Mm-hmm. You don't want to have a kid or be an uncle to a kid coming up in the next 10, 15, 20 years and have them still stuck in the same places that we are. You want your kid to like get an assignment from the top executive producer at a network and not have to worry that if they don't kiss them, they're not going to get the assignment, or worse. That's a small example. Mm-hmm. So I really say that because strapping in for the discomfort is so necessary, because this isn't really that fun, but it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. It will make such a difference down the road.
Awesome. So now is the part of this conversation where it's shameless plug time. So I want you to talk about where can people find you, you know, social handles, book, where can people buy it, your website. Tell us, like, where can we find you?
Cool. So the book is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. You can buy it literally everywhere. It's been covered everywhere, from Rolling Stone to LinkedIn, ABC News, Fortune Magazine. It's everywhere. If you want to work with me one-on-one, I do work around this stuff. I teach corporate workshops. If you're like, oh, my team could really use this, get in touch. And yeah, I mean, if you know anything in this conversation has moved you, or I have a story about this, please get in touch. I'm everywhere, so easy to get in touch with.
So awesome. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on, having this conversation with me. You know, we're still a scrappy little startup, and obviously your book and what you've said is so important to the mission that, you know, we have personally. You know, I feel very honored to be able to share this space with you, to be able to talk to you. So thank you so much, Cleo. And I know this is like only the first conversation of many.
Yeah, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of everything you guys are aiming to do at Tethr. It's very exciting.
We've got some pretty cool announcements coming up in the next little while, and obviously Addison is our biggest champion in the threads.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of cool stuff coming up. We'll keep you in the loop, and I'm sure there's a lot of ways that we can collaborate, work together, and further this conversation together going forward.
Awesome. I wish I didn't have to say this on the live feed, but make sure you save this file so I can promote it on mine as well.
Oh yeah, I'm saving this as soon as I'm saving this as soon as it's done. I will send it to you directly,
Cool.
and I'd love for you to promote it. That would mean a lot.
Great.
Okay,
Bye.
awesome. Thank you so much, Cleo. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.